Hello, in this video we are going to learn how to use our new Forms feature. With Robomotion Forms, you can create permanent or temporary forms and share a link with anyone to get a response. This can help you to collect data from anyone. You can even create this form inside your flow dynamically and send it to anyone via email, Telegram, or Discord. While you are waiting for a response, you can stop your flow and your robot may run other jobs. After you get a response, you can continue your process with the help of our trigger feature. So let's try this form and fill these fields. After I press submit, this will trigger a flow to run and get this posted data to process. Our example flow shows the data inside a message box and stops. So we will learn how to create this form application inside your flows. We will first learn how to create a form inside your flows. So 1.18.7 robot version comes with our forms feature, and you will see a forms package here in the flow designer. So we have the nodes here to create a form, update, delete a form, and list your forms. There's currently not a fancy UI editor to create a form like a drag and drop editor, but we have plans to add that. Because of that, we have separated these nodes. Create form is actually used to create the actual form. Currently, we do this with a JSON object. I will explain also how to create this JSON object later in the video. So after that, after you create a form, you create a form instance. This node comes with a type feature. I have to explain also this one. You can create a form instance type as a disposable or a permanent one. If you select the disposable type, then your form, after you submit one response, it will disappear. So it will be a temporary form. If you select the permanent type, then your form URL will be available forever, and every submitted data will be entered into your queues. So to use a form feature, you need to have also a queue feature. In your admin console, you can go to the queue screen and you can create a new queue by pressing this button. You can give any name to your queue, but this name is important. We will use this name in our nodes. So I have created a queue named Summer Interns. And here we give the name of our queue. And also we need to provide a credential. This is a new credential type we have added also in the latest version of the robot, and that is an RSA key pair item. When you press this, it will create you a public-private key pair, and this is created because we need to get the posted data in an encrypted format to insert to our queues, but we can't embed an AES key to the form because that would be not secure. Everyone will see our key. So to solve this, we are using a public-private key pair. We embed only the public key into our forms, and when the form is about to be submitted, the data is encrypted on the client side who is entering the data, and then that encrypted data is posted over SSL and comes to our servers, and then it is inserted into a queue. Even us, we can't decrypt that data, we can't see that data, because you only can decrypt that data with your RSA private key that is in your vault, and you can only reach your vault, or your robot can reach your vault items with your vault secret key. So this is how we do the security of this form submissions, these data. So the create forms just needs a title and description. We pass this data from this function. We pass a title and a description here, and then, as I said earlier, we need a queue name here and the RSA key pair credential. After this node runs, it will output a form ID, and this create form instance is the node that actually creates the form URL. So it takes the form ID as an input, and you just select the type of the form. So let's try to run this and see how it works. You see, this is the form URL. If you copy paste this, you'll see the forms here. So this is how to create a form within your flow. Now we are going to learn how to process this form. To handle the form data, I have also created a flow which you can find in the YouTube description. So because our form data, when submitted, inserted into our queues in an encrypted format, we have to get that data from our queue. So to do that, you can use the queue package and use the get next item node here. So I just use that node and rename it to get form response. You just need to enter the queue name here that we are using, and also the credential that is needed to decrypt that data by the robot. So here we created a flow. It starts and get the next item from the queue to be processed, and here we see a function node. This is actually, message item is actually the output of get next item. We are submitting from our form an email field, a name field, and surname field. And when get next item runs, it will output the message item object, which will have name, surname, and email fields. I just created a string here by using those fields. I have used string interpolation feature of JavaScript. You can write in just one line and create a sentence from a dynamic data here that we are getting from message.item object. So this is the message text, and then we pass this through message box. The title is set to new application, and the input is message text, and that's it. After that, we have to update the queue items state into, we set here successful, because we have successfully processed that data. This will change the queue state when a new form data is submitted. You will see the data in this new field, and when you use the get next item node here, it will move into the in progress status, and when you update the status of this queue item here with the status successful, it will be moved into the success fully completed queue state, queue item state. So here we do that, and then we use a go to node to go to beginning of this flow, and we call again get next item. This is because there may be another item posted while we are processing this. This may be a long processing flow or a subflow maybe. Then we try to get the next item if there is anyone. If there is none, then this create message will throw an exception because message item will be null. So we catch that and then stop the flow. So here it is not very hard to get the item from the queue and process and update the state, but we want to start this flow immediately when a new form data is submitted and inserted into our queue. So to do that, we use the trigger feature. Also, this queue insert trigger feature is added in the latest version of the robot. So you can go to the admin console trigger screen and press add trigger. This is the queue trigger added recently. You select the insert and you enter the name of your queue. Our queue's name is summer interns, and you can press next, and here you give a name to your trigger. So you can give summer interns form handler to description, just pass it. And also you need to select the flow that is going to be triggered. So I select the form handler. Of course, you have to create a version for this flow, and you have to publish it to see it in this select box. So we have form handler also published before, and we can select the latest published version here, which is V2, and we select the robot that is going to be listening this trigger, and it will run this flow when it is triggered. I am not pressing this button because I have created a trigger before. So this trigger is will going to run on the blue steel robot, and it will run the form handler, which is here, and then the V2 version. So let's try to run this manual first. It created an exception because there is no item in the queue recently, which we can also see here. There is no new item. Let's submit a data here. We have to refresh this because there is a captcha here. It expires after some time. Okay, it's now submitted. Now, if we refresh the screen, we can see the item is in progress because it is actually triggered and run. So what we can do here, we can delete this. There is no pause option in the triggers currently, so we can delete this and create it later. So it is actually processed, and there is now let's check the queues. It's moved to the completed. So we have to try this again. We have deleted the trigger. Now we want to process this manually. Let's submit this again. Okay, now when we check, you see this, it is in the new status, and when we run this manually, we get the item. You see the message box here, processed, and it stops. Now we saw this the manual run. We will again create the trigger here, queue insert summer interns, form trigger. We want form handle run V2 and the blue steel robot. The Velocity robot is actually running on my computer. Let's create this. Now the trigger is ready. I can close this, and actually I will bring the robot application here. And let's see what happens when I submit this. You see, it is very fast. Now the trigger, it is triggered. We have message box here, and when I press OK, it stops the flow. So this is how to create a form handler flow and create a trigger for it. To watch the triggers in the background. So this helps you to use your robot in other jobs, because you are not listening the queue all the time, but when a new data is inserted into a queue, it is triggered on your robot, and it takes maybe 10 seconds or 30 seconds, depends on your subflow, on your process, and it will stop processing that. Then your robot will be in idle state, and you can use your robot in other jobs or tasks. So next we are going to learn how to create the forms by using the open source JSON forms library. We now return to our form creator flow here. In the create form node, we see this JSON object. We now going to see how to create this JSON object and understand how it works. So our forms feature is built on an open source library called JSON Forms. It is a library that helps you to render a form in your user interfaces with a JSON object definition like this. So this is a more complex one. Let's see a simpler one. So you define two things to create a form with JSON Forms library. You need the schema that you define the fields in your form, and also you define a UI schema which helps you to create a layout for your forms. As I said, we have plans to create a drag and drop form editor in our later versions, but for now we have to learn how to use a JSON Forms object. This JSONforms.io has many examples here you can test with. You can copy paste data from here into your flows, but there is an easier way to test these properties and JSON forms, that is JSON Forms editor. This is also an open source project that helps you to create forms in this drag and drop editor. So to use this editor, we first need to define the objects that we use in our forms. So here let's copy paste a simpler one here. So let's copy paste this into here, the JSON schema tab here. If you press this editor button and copy paste it here, let's make it more simpler. Let's delete this one and also these, and let's give names here. Let's call it name. Let's call it it is hard to name things. Okay, let's leave this way, boolean number date. But the important thing is the JSON Forms library turns these names into form field names with the camel case naming. So if you set this boolean type, for example, and apply this here, you will see the name here. But when we use the layouts objects here, let's use the vertical layout and drag and drop the boolean name here, you will see it is turned into uppercase and also separated with a space. So this is the boolean type, and we can add a name here. So what we did here, we created the properties that are going to be in our forms. Name, let's call this surname. You have to edit this. Let's call this surname. The type is string, and also let's call this birth date. You see this is type string, but the format is important here. Format date tells the JSON forms to show the type as a date. So let's turn back to this palette and drag and drop surname and then birth date. You see it is rendered as a date field because we tell to JSON forms that this is type string but the format is date. So you can find all the formats here, date time, or even you can use a select box in your forms. Let's also try to use this. Let's add another field here. Let's call this gender, male, female, and now let's apply this and try to use this in our schema here. Now it is also a select box. Now this is a finished form. As I said, you can check this JSON Forms site to see many different forms of properties here. You can learn more here. So you can, for example, set a minimum length or a description in your forms. So let's see how it works. For example, first name. Please enter your first name. So first name is written like this. Again, in a camel case. This is where the space is added. It is a string. Its minimum length is 3, and this description appears here like this. So you can create the properties by finding other types in this JSON Forms IO site. And after that, after you finish creating your form, just go to this JSON schema site and copy paste this field, and then go to the create form node, edit it, and replace this part, this schema part here, with your schema you have created, and then go to UI schema. This is actually generated by this JSON Forms editor. You drag and drop the properties you have added here, and it creates the UI schema for you. You can also use horizontal layout, maybe. You can add name and then a surname after that here. Yeah, you can create this. But if you check the UI schema, you see a vertical layout. Inside it, there is a horizontal layout, but you don't write this. It just generates this for you. So this is great, actually. Now let's delete this one. This is what we want. And then copy paste this field here, and then enter this UI schema part to here, paste it here. So we are done. Save this and then close. Now you can run this flow, and it will create the form URL for you. Now let's check this. You see it generated a new form with the fields we added. So that's how you create a Robomotion form inside your flows and how to use this form. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have questions, please come to our Discord community server. We are most of the time online there to help with your questions. Also, we have a great community. It is a very active channel. I suggest you to join our Discord server. Thank you.